Cravings are a combination of thoughts, emotions, and physical urges a person has for an addictive behavior, and these cravings can be a difficult challenge in the recovery process. Cravings can range from very mild to very distressing, and can lead to relapse if a person is not able to cope in a healthy way. Cravings are normal in recovery, and do not mean that something is wrong, or that sobriety is no longer important to you. Cravings happen because many things have been paired with substance use. So when the person is around those things, they can serve as a trigger to think about using. Some common craving triggers can include being around people who use or drink, receiving money or getting paid, getting off of work, or having an argument with someone. Cravings can also be triggered by emotions, such as anxiety, depression, anger, or even excitement. Craving triggers vary from person to person, and what might be a trigger for some may not be a trigger for others. Cravings are time-limited and usually last from just a few moments to around 30 minutes or so. But if a person continues to fantasize or think about using, the craving can last much longer. Cravings are a result of classical conditioning. Ivan Pavlov performed the first experiments of classical conditioning in the 1880s. In his research on how salivation is involved in digestion, he collected saliva from dogs in small test tubes. He noticed, however, that the dogs began to salivate when they heard the footsteps of the technician who fed them, not just when they were given food. He called this early salivation response psychic secretion. Pavlov then shifted the focus of his research to study this reaction and predicted that if he were to pair something with food enough times, that it could eventually cause salivation on its own. In his initial experiments, Pavlov rang a bell and then gave the dogs food. After repeating this several times, the dogs began to salivate just in response to hearing the bell. He called this classical conditioning or acquisition. Because drinking or using is frequently paired with different things, for example sporting events, certain people, bad days, etc., they can become conditioned to a person's use and remind the person of using. Classical conditioning occurs, and those things can then trigger cravings, just as Pavlov's bell triggered salivation for food. Pavlov continued his research and learned that this conditioned salivation response could eventually go away over time. In this next phase, he rang the bell again, but no longer gave the dogs food, then rang the bell again and did not give food. Over time, the dogs stopped salivating in response to the bell. The salivation response they had been conditioned to have went away. He called this extinction. When a person stops using drugs or alcohol, they continue to have cravings for some time when they are presented with triggers, for example, going to the store. But if the person does not use, extinction eventually occurs, and these cravings decrease over time. Life has a way of providing its own triggers, which makes sobriety difficult enough, so people in early recovery should not be unnecessarily putting themselves in situations they know will trigger cravings, because this will only make it more difficult to stay sober. Most people tend to have cravings most during the first 3 months of sobriety, and after this they usually happen less often and become less intense as a person stays sober. Pavlov performed another phase of research though. He wanted to see if he could make the dogs salivate again when hearing the bell now that they had stopped. So he rang the bell and again provided food. Then he rang the bell again, but did not give food. But the dogs were once again salivating to the bell alone. He called this reacquisition. By providing the food again, the salivation response quickly returned, and the dogs again had to go through the process of extinction. When a person in recovery is no longer having cravings in response to a trigger, but then relapses and pairs using with that thing again, then it can once again trigger ongoing cravings. For example, imagine a person no longer has cravings after getting off work, but one day uses again after work. Over the next few weeks after getting off of work, the person can have cravings to use again, even though they are abstinent. The process of extinction will need to run its course again. In summary, acquisition equals addiction, extinction equals sobriety, and reacquisition equals relapse. Because of classical conditioning, cravings are a normal and an expected part of the recovery process, and you can learn how to cope with these cravings in a healthy way. A helpful strategy is recognize, avoid, and cope. First, recognize what your triggers are. Second, plan ways to avoid these triggers such as reducing contact with using friends, getting rid of paraphernalia, staying away from bars, not carrying cash, and avoiding other substance use. Third, cope in healthier ways using the following tools. Consider these 5 strategies for coping with cravings. 1. Healthy distraction. This might include leaving the situation, exercise, relaxation techniques, hobbies and interests, spending time with sober friends or family, or joining a club, class, or group. When cravings happen, these activities can keep you occupied until the craving passes. 2. Talk about the craving. Calling and talking with a supportive, sober person when you have a craving can help reduce the feelings of anxiety that often accompany cravings. However, some close family members may become too distressed when you tell them you're having a craving because they become afraid you might relapse. It is important to call someone who won't be too scared when you tell them about this and can instead offer support. Remember, instead of reaching for the bottle, reach for the phone. Recalling the negative consequences. Playing the tape. During cravings, people tend to think about the positive effects of using and do not think about the negative consequences they've had. They hit pause on the videotape of the mind where the person feels short-term gratification, but do not allow the tape to continue playing to the end, where things often go badly. It is helpful during these times to remind yourself where using leads and the problems it creates. Remember, relapse is a rerun. You know how the story ends. Keeping a card with you that lists specific negative consequences you have had can be particularly helpful to read when you have cravings. Urge surfing, a mindfulness technique that helps you allow your cravings to come, then peak and feel intense, and then pass naturally on their own, like a wave coming up and then going down. To practice urge surfing, first, acknowledge the craving. If possible, put yourself in a comfortable place. Notice the craving is there and breathe slowly. Second, notice what you are feeling in your body. Close your eyes and just breathe, and notice any uncomfortable physical feelings you're having, for example, increased heart rate, tension in your body, or tightness in your stomach. Third, remind yourself that you will be okay and allow these uncomfortable feelings to be. Do not try to stop these feelings. Allow the discomfort and continue to focus on your breathing. This practice can lower feelings of urgency and panic and help you shift your attention to other activities until the craving passes. Listening to a guided meditation on your phone or other device can also help with this. Time is the only real cure for cravings. If you allow them to be, they will pass. Positive self-talk. Self-coaching. Craving thoughts often involve a strong sense of urgency that justify using, like, I have to use now, this is too much, I can't handle this, I can't do anything until I use. But these thoughts aren't true. Developing a different form of self-talk that motivates sobriety can be very helpful when these kinds of thoughts arise, such as, okay, I'm having a craving, but this is normal. Who is someone I can call for support, or what can I do to distract myself right now? I have tools that can help me cope with this until it passes. Many people with long-term sobriety have found these strategies helpful to cope with their cravings and move forward in their recovery.